Well, spent the first couple seconds, 45 seconds muted, so there's that. Um, but wanted to say welcome to everybody tonight. Thank you for jumping on. For those of you that have been here and been coming every week, I really appreciate all the conversations that we have. I really enjoy it. Really means a lot to me. So thank you for jumping on. And for those of you that may be new to the channel, I'm Chris Gambill. This is my channel, the Data Engineering channel, where I cover topics about data engineering, data analytics, career advice. I cover SQL, different tutorials, SQL, Python, try to do some demos of different ETL tools, and to try to get you the tools and resources that you need and the education that you need to achieve a data profession, a data position at a company. So super excited to be here. Super excited about the growth of our community over the last several weeks. And tonight I wanted to talk about and this concept of academic versus real world data. And it, so often when we are in school or doing some type of tutorial, we often get this very pristine, very structured data set. And you get out into the real world and it's a surprise when data is messy and it doesn't come structured, and you have to figure out how to get it into the right format. And you have to, take a very weirdly formatted date and get it into a format that goes into your data warehouse. So, so many examples that I could go through, but I wanted to, just kind of talk through that and what that looks like, and also, maybe do a poll if I can figure out how to do a poll on here. Um, Maybe just ask people to put in the comments. You know, tell me, tell me about what your do you think that your data skills are ready for the real world? Um, because let me tell you, what really happens when you start working with live data is very different than what you get when you're learning and when you're studying. Um, just very different. Um, I gotta, I've talked about this once before, but I had the opportunity when I was a associate director to work with some University of Florida students, um, as a kind of a work opportunity that they got to work with some of our live AT&T data. Um, and we anonymized all the customer data, and kept everything private, but we gave them some data so that they could build some propensity to purchase, propensity to buy models. So the models would score, based on different criteria that they determined, um, score each customer and what different products that they're most likely to buy, so that our sales reps can go out and target those top 10% that were likely to buy. And so they did a fantastic job. It was awesome, but the data was dirty. I mean, the data, you know even at large corporations, the data's not clean, right? There's work that has to be done to figure out how to populate data that's missing, figure out how to make things that data in different columns consistent, so that you could do that analysis. So just want to talk through that and what that looks like. There's so many of you out there that have joined the channel that are looking to get into a data profession, and like I said, I think a lot of our um, educational data sets are pretty whole and pretty clean overall, and that's just not how things are in the real world. um, so for those of you that are on, put in the chat, tell me, how many of you have worked with academic data, with data that is for training and it looks whole and pristine? And maybe that's all you've worked with. You've not gotten a chance to work with data that is messy, or real world data that just isn't quite right. Um, so tell me about your experiences in the chat. I'd love to have those conversations. So again, academic data is so often very curated, very it's clean, it's well labeled, perfectly structured. Um, and that's great, and you need that to be able to learn the concepts, to be able to practice your programming skills without getting bogged down on all the cleaning things that has to happen. As I'm going through this, if you have any questions, even if it's off topic, be sure to put them in the chat. Would love to have those conversations. um, but yeah, in academia, when you're in training mode, you get very pristine data sets. You get into the real world, and again, it's often messy. The data is not consistent, full of unexpected surprises. Whether it's because you're getting the data from a vendor or you're getting the data from a person. Salesforce data is notoriously wrought with issues because so much of Salesforce data is manually entered by a sales rep that's in a hurry to make a sale. You know, User entry is not always the most trustworthy, right? You um, you have to clean it, or you have to enforce data diligence with leaders so that they can kind of inspect what they expect from their sales reps, from their sales managers. Sales managers have to get with their sales reps, make sure that they're entering data into Salesforce in a way that when they do get the reports, then the reports are whole and accurate. um, because it could be so dirty. It's user entry. It's user entry. It's can be can be challenging when you're trying to clean it. And I'll say that cleaning user entry data is a slippery slope. It is once you start down that path of cleaning data that's user entry data, you'll find yourself making changes all the time to adjust for all the different scenarios that come through. So I would encourage you as you move through your career to learn and to work with your sales leaders, with your leaders of those organizations that are doing that manual data entry, to ensure that they're performing due diligence and they're inspecting what their sales reps are doing to make sure that the data that they're getting back is whole, accurate, and as helpful as it can be. Um, all that to say, there's this concept in data that is GIGO, which is garbage in, garbage out. Um, and it's very true. It holds true with every organization. There's no organization that escapes garbage in, garbage out. There's just not. Um, and so, again, I talked about Salesforce. Salesforce is a big piece out there that a lot of companies use. And there's so many free form fields, but also, there's also a lot of data that you may get that is in Excel that people are putting into some CSV or some Excel file somewhere, dumping it somewhere, and you're ingesting it. And so even those Excel files are, important to keep clean. And everybody's got a system. Everybody's got a CRM out there that there's some free form fields, and the data has to be cleansed in order to do things like machine learning, in order to feed that data into an AI model, in order to feed that data into propensity models, or even reporting, just regular reporting. Um, so, yeah, that concept, data cleaning is often, for those of you that are just getting into it, data cleaning is like 80% of the job. Um, and it is so incredibly important to make sure that you're keeping the data consistent, that you're keeping the data as accurate as possible, or the data becomes useless, right? There's if if what's going into your data warehouse is not useful, then what's being put into your reporting is not going to be accurate, and it's not going to it's not going to give the growth to your business um, that it should, right? Because you're not going to be able to make the decisions that you need to make based on dirty data. Um, so some of the key skills for handling real world data. Um, Again, if you have any questions or thoughts uh, as I go through this, be sure to pop them in the chat. Happy to change subjects if the community has something else on their mind. But definitely, this is a topic that was kind of top of mind to me today, and I wanted to talk about it tonight. Real world data. So key skills. So data cleaning is, I've talked over the past week on the videos that I've published, and about polars and pandas. If you haven't checked those out, be sure you go back and check those out. Those are two libraries that you'll use as a data engineer. And pandas is the primary library that we use for data analysis, for data cleaning, for creating data frames and moving data even. While polars is a Rust based, the language that it's written in that it uses is Rust. And but not important to know Rust, but it's important to know that polars has some multi-threading ability. So it can think of it as pandas is the one lane highway and polars is an interstate, right? It's got multiple lanes that people could run down all at once, that the data can flow down all at once. And so it's quicker, right? Polars is incredibly quicker for the larger the data set is. But all that to say, we talked about a bit about data cleaning this week in those two videos. And which is why I'm having this part of why this was top of mind for me tonight. Um, but understanding those different cleaning techniques, understanding your data well enough so that you could determine, can I use a median? Can I use an average to populate the missing data in these fields? Do I just need to remove the fields altogether? What do you need to do to make the best decision for the data set in order to get the best outcome for your reporting, for your machine learning models, whatever the case may be, wherever you're feeding that data into? So, so a big part of all of our data jobs is to understand the data sets well enough, to understand our business well enough to be able to make those decisions. And part of that is having conversations with your stakeholders. Part of that is, looking at the data and studying the data to understand the data well enough to make those decisions. And part of it is, frankly, something that you learn as you move through your career, and you learn by looking at the data and if you're in a specific market or industry for a long period of time, then you start to get an instinct on how to cleanse data. And even when you are at that point, it's still important. I would still encourage you to make sure that you're still going out and having those conversations with your stakeholders, with your end users, with your leadership on what do you want out of this data, so that you can make good fact-based decisions, so that you could give them data to make good data-driven decisions. So all that to say that that understanding of data is called exploratory data analysis. And so again, using exploratory data analysis to go through and study your data and understand your data is important, so that you can be able to make those decisions. Again, For those of you that have been on before, you know that you could throw anything in the chat, any questions that you may have, and I'll address them. And again, under the last piece here is understanding context. So knowing, I talked about this a moment ago, but knowing the business context well enough to understand what the data should look like. And sometimes the only way for you to know that is to have those conversations with the stakeholders and with your leaders to be able to make those decisions. Um, and again, the way that we cleanse that data, you could use SQL, you could use Python, depending on the size of the data, and where the data lives. Especially if you have like a medallion model that you're working through, then using probably, if you're moving data from like a bronze layer to a silver layer, then Python's a good choice, right? You could use Python to read that raw data that's in your bronze layer, do any type of translations or manipulations to get it into a silver layer as you're pushing it up through that medallion model. And so using Python and pandas, or for really large data sets, if you're talking millions of records, then you may potentially be using something like Databricks, and you could use a PySpark, which is one of the libraries in pandas, or polars. Like I said, I did the video on polars earlier this week, and polars is a great option, especially as you get into like the tens of millions of records. It just, the polars and PySpark do a great job the larger the data set. Pandas is good for foundational knowledge as you're learning, for your smaller data sets, but as you move into those larger data sets, into big data, you'll want to move into polars and then into PySpark. So that kind of goes to the value of building that robust ETL pipeline so that it can handle all that cleansing, and you're writing those scripts in order to cleanse that data as it moves through your ETL process or ELT process. So at this point, I've got kind of in my agenda here. This is the point where if you have any questions. Oh, hey there, Sparkling Shorts. What's the job market looking like? So it honestly seems to be starting to pick back up a little bit, which is surprising for fourth quarter. Honestly, as we move into fourth quarter, there's been so many layoffs lately in tech, but I'm starting to see more and more jobs posting, which is not what I expected for fourth quarter. Usually, companies are kind of ramping down when it comes to fourth quarter, but things that, particularly in the data industry, seem to be picking up a bit. So I'm hopeful as we move into first quarter that it will continue to do that. I hate to say this, and I'm not a political person when it comes to anything, but I think that regardless of which way the elections go in the U.S., as we move through that, the corporations that are U.S. based will start to pick back up, because they'll understand what kind of agendas will be set, and they'll understand better kind of where they can go as a company and where they're going to get funded potentially as a company, to be able to know where to spend money to fill those positions at. In the U.S., that's just this election period for the next month or two is an uncertain time for companies, because things can change. Thanks. Great question. I appreciate the question. Thank you. So if anybody else has any other questions job market, about interviews, SQL, Python, anything data engineering related, data profession related, I'm happy to answer those questions. Pop them in the chat. But wanted to get back real quick to kind of wrapping up my conversation about data. So data diligence. Data diligence is really important when it comes to freeform fields and data that you're ingesting, right? And data diligence means that you're partnering with the leaders in your organization to enforce and inspire the importance of making sure that the data that's being entered into source systems are whole and accurate. So source systems are, your systems of record, your sales forces, your Oracle front ends, right? Um, your ERP systems. There's so many freeform fields in those systems. It's important that you can, enforce that due diligence. And the way that you do that is having those conversations with your leaders in your organization. As a junior, you may not have a whole lot of opportunity to do that, but you could enforce that with your project managers who can push that up to their leadership. Um, but all of that practicing doing that, it helps you with your soft skills. Again, soft skills are how we differentiate ourselves from AI. uh, the role of soft skills in influencing leadership and other teams about the importance of data is an important skill to develop as you move through your career. It's what will differentiate you when you're moving from a fresher position, a junior position, into a more senior position, and especially as you're moving into a staff or a leadership position in data. Being able, you could demonstrate those skills at any level, and when you do, people will take notice, especially if you do it in a professional and an inspiring manner. If you could, effectively convince people and inspire people to provide clean data, um, and into the thought process that you're going for, then people will see that, take notice, and move you up into higher level positions. Um, so being able to communicate, hey, when you do this, it impacts your data this way, which impacts your reports, which impacts your pocket, right? For sales reps, they're making commission. You could explain that, hey, not putting data correctly here means that I'm not giving you good leads here, and that's impacting your ability to sell and your own pocketbook. And that's, when you start explaining that piece, when you start explaining that it's impacting their pocketbooks, that's when people will start taking notice, whether they're a leader, whether they're a frontline person. um, so that's always, anytime you could explain it back to dollars and cents for somebody, people start taking notice. um, so that's one of the strategies that you could use as a data engineer, as a data analyst, um, or even as a data scientist, to convince people to be more diligent about how they're entering their data. um, Again, any questions, any thoughts, any personal experiences that you want to put in the chat, let me know. Put them in the chat. um, I'd love to hear from the community. So that's a little bit about due diligence. My next piece that I have on my agenda is Q&A. So again, I'll open up for questions. So if anybody has any other questions, be sure to pop them in the chat. If you have any stories about, maybe you've started your own data journey, or maybe you are in a junior position or a senior position and have a story about having to cleanse dirty data, or having to have that conversation with your salespeople as to the importance of data, I'd love to hear about those stories in the chat. Um, it's quiet tonight. So let's see, just about 25 minutes in. So usually this is when people start picking up too. Um, so, some of the key things that we talked about this evening are, the difference between academic data and real world data, and how academic data is pristine and clean, and, real world data is just not. I mean, it's just, there's so many things that potentially can change and become inconsistent, especially over time. And then we talked about, a lot about user entry data and, free form fields in source systems, and how, you know, it's a slippery slope to start trying to effectively cleanse that data. If you're trying to make a bunch of exceptions for a bunch of different ways that people could enter that data, it's really a slippery and time consuming slope that you could slide down. I've seen people do it. I've done it early in my career. And you start having to create exceptions for every possible scenario. And there's no end to that. There's just not. Um, which led into the garbage in, garbage out concept, right? You hear that, you know, you know, really prolifically through the profession of data professions of, you know, I can't give you a good report because it's garbage in, garbage out. Uh, whatever data that you get fed is what's going to show up in the reports, which goes back to the conversation I just had about, you know, explaining to sales reps what you put in is going to be as good as the leads that you get back out, when it comes time to looking at leads and reports with potential people that are going to purchase your product and what that looks like. So if you're still learning, don't be intimidated by the messiness and the madness that can come with real world data. Um, Again, if you're in university at a university that and as you move through your career, your academic career, have those conversations with your professors, have those conversations with your kind of your heads of your departments or your mentors, and and ask them if they can partner with an organization to be able to maybe do a project, because there are organizations out there that don't have the manpower that probably would love to get some data scientists, data engineers in to help with maybe building some propensity models. So this is a great question, Mike. um, are you able to tell if the data is bad before you start a project? Generally no. uh, it, not until you start looking at the data. That's why it's important when you do get your hands on the data, because a lot of times a project manager will have a project that they want to start and they'll put a ticket in, and you'll go out and have to go out and investigate that data source. Sometimes it's going to be a database, sometimes it's going to be an API, sometimes it's going to be a CSV file. And you're going to have to look through that data and do some exploratory analysis to determine if the data is accurate and consistent and whole, if formatting is correct, accurate and consistent across the file, if different fields are being populated accurately. And sometimes even doing that exploratory analysis, you're not going to be able to figure it out. It sometimes until the end of the project, unfortunately, there's going to be times when you're at the reporting stage where you've created a Power BI report or a Tableau report or Looker report or whatever the case may be, and you're doing like user testing, right? You're doing UAT, and those people are out there, they're looking at the data and they're like, this is not quite right. It should look like this. And sometimes that's the point at which you figure out um, that the data is not whole or accurate. A lot of it you'll be able to figure out up front, but really when you start getting the business involved with looking at the data and the reports with you, so the earlier you could do that, the better. Is when you'll really understand, okay, there's something not quite right here. It doesn't look right, because they'll have an instinct. They've probably been looking at the data for months or even years sometimes before you get the project, and they'll be able to tell you, no, we've had to do these other things with Excel files manually to get it into the right format, and we forgot to share that up front when people were asking us about the project. So the more conversations you could have with the market up front, with the business up front, the better. Great question. Awesome. I'm glad that you asked that question. Does that make sense, Mike? Let me know if you want me to, if you have any questions about that. Um, Awesome questions tonight. Thanks, guys. Uh, and I see we've got a handful of people on. Again, if you have any questions, be sure to pop them in the chat. Again, really talking tonight about the concept of garbage in, garbage out, and dirty data when you're looking at projects. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking the question. That's an important question. So again, if you're still learning, if you're still just getting into the profession, into your career, don't be intimidated. Don't be scared about this. It it happens. I mean, it happens everywhere. Understand that even after you finish a project, sometimes you're going to have to go back because sometimes the data is going to change. Sometimes you're going to get a data set that somebody's added a column. Sometimes you're working with a vendor and the vendor's dropping a file somewhere and you're ingesting that file, and the vendor will make a change and they forgot to communicate that with you. And you'll have to readjust later on. So these things happen in the real world. It's part of it. But it's learning and setting things up in a way that your pipelines and your workflows in a way that identifies that and alerts you before it gets into the data, before it gets into the data set and impacts your end users, is something that you learn to do as you move through your career, and you'll get better at that as you do learn and grow. Um, Especially since there's so many businesses out there that you may be the only data person, or there may be just a couple of you. So you'll learn that as you move through your career, that how to set things up and to set things in place that catches that messy data before it impacts your business or your end users. Uh, and there's a lot of ways to do that, and sometimes you have to come up with very creative ways to do that. So awesome. So, what do you recommend to a new grad in computer science trying to get an internship or a career in data in today's market? There is no better way to do that than networking, right? Whether that be networking with people on LinkedIn or going to meetup events in your area. If you could get a live face to face with somebody and you could demonstrate that you could communicate well, then then that's something, that's a big deal. So if you can get in front of people, all the better. But reaching out to contacts, reaching out to talking to your professors, even in college, a lot of them often have some type of ties to the field, some type of networking in the field where they can kind of try and help you out sometimes. So don't be afraid to ask your professors, ask your mentors as you're in going through your academic career, but also getting out and just meeting people in the field, meeting people at, like I said, at meetups, going to, um, oh my God, I just went blank, but, uh, oh my gosh, um, going to, events that, for data professionals, conventions and stuff where you can interact and talk to other people. Um, Internships are hard, right? I mean, there's only generally only a certain number of internships, and if you could get an internship and you do an extremely well job, a lot of times, that can turn into a career. Um, so, that's a big thing. But moving directly into a career and applying for jobs, you know, be sure that you have your scope wide enough that you're not narrowed in on a specific job title. Make sure that you're looking for, like, if you're wanting data engineering, right? Um, or whichever position that you're looking specifically for. If you want to put it in the chat, then I'll address that specific position. Um, but if, for example, if you're looking at data engineering, making sure that you're looking at ETL developer, making sure that you're looking at even SQL developer, right? Don't narrow your scope so much that you're only looking at data engineering positions, specifically that title, right? Um, And honestly, as data engineers, a lot of times, in order to get your foot in the door, in order to get real world experience and get something on your resume, you're going to have to move into like a data analyst position in order to get that experience and that you know background, so that you can move into a data engineering position later on. But even with that, networking's the best thing. If you apply for something, if you could figure out from the job posting who the recruiter is, reaching out to that recruiter one on one and sending an email or sending a LinkedIn message or some type of connection and saying, "Hey, I saw this position. This is who I am. This is my background." Um, that sometimes could at least get you past that initial phase, that initial round. Um, and then once you get to the point where you're in an interview and you are interviewing, then making sure that you have some examples that you can share during that interview, even if they're from school, even if they're from some type of capstone or you know some type of project that you did, being able to demonstrate your communication skills, being able to demonstrate your technical ability, um, and your business acumen will make a big difference. So be sure that you're prepared that way. Build your portfolio out on GitHub. Create a Git repo and put some of your projects out there so that you could share that with potential employers. Uh, lots of different ways and avenues to go at to show people and potential employers that you have the experience that you need to move into those positions. And if you have questions about different types of projects to do, then then let me know too, either in the chat or feel free to shoot me an email. Great question. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining tonight. It's I appreciate all the questions. Awesome, guys. Well, if anybody else has any other questions, be sure to pop them in the chat. Uh, really having a great conversation tonight with Sparkling Shorts and Mike. So, for those of you that again are maybe new to the channel, uh, I've been doing a handful of Python videos lately. So, if that's something that you're currently learning, be sure to check those out. Uh, I'm probably getting ready to wrap up that series, and I'll move into a little bit, revisit window functions a little bit, probably do a little bit more advanced window functions. And then from there, I'm going to probably do some demos of different ETL tools, unless somebody has other ideas that they want to see me do on the channel. If there's any specific um, topics that you want me to cover, whether it be some type of concept or a specific tool that you'd like to see me cover, then I'd be happy to do that and address those needs of the community as well. And then also for those of you that are new, we have a Discord channel as well. Um, it's called the Gambill Data Sphere, uh, and there's a link to that in the contact information on the YouTube channel. So if you want to join that community as well, that's out there. And we also do monthly. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Um, we also do monthly coding challenges. We're in the middle of the October coding challenge. It is a SQL challenge where I've given you a data set of 1 million records to perform some aggregations, and whoever has the most efficient, readable, maintainable code will be. I'll get a chance to be in the spotlight during our code review. Which potentially maybe you could also use as something that you could show off to employers, right? Is hey, this is a data set that I was able to go out and look at and practice with. But if that's something anybody's interested in, be sure to go check that out as well. It's the coding challenge. There's a video about it on the channel. And then also you could go to the website, gambledataengineering.com /services, and you could join the Gamble Data Sphere there and then get access. There's no cost or anything. It's just a way for me to track who's downloading the data. But also, then you'll have access to that data, as well as getting ready. Gonna try this weekend to get the scripts that I've used during the videos out there, so that you could download them from there as well. So be sure to check that out if that's if you're interested in that. Uh, Aside from that, again, any questions, pop them in the chat. A lot of times on these calls on Friday nights, we get some people coming in and just like Mike, wanting and needing to understand, okay, what direction can I go in order to secure a position? Whether that, as you're going through your interview process, how to answer certain questions, what things to be prepared for, what things look good, what things maybe don't. So it often get a lot of those questions on these Friday night calls. I do this every Friday night at 10 p.m., usually for about an hour. Sometimes we get really into a really great conversation, and there's been a couple that have lasted as much as 2 hours almost. So be sure to come back on Friday nights and continue our conversations. I really do enjoy getting to this opportunity to get a chance to interact with the community. I will say on November 1st, I'm doing a special one, probably earlier in the day. I want to say that we're going to do it at 5 p.m. Eastern. Me and another gentleman he's working on his master's degree and has this, fantastic outlook and concept of data guided decisions versus data driven decisions. And we're going to have that conversation. He's a mid-career changer. So he's been in education for a lot of his career, and he's moving into a data position. So we're going to be interviewing him on the 1st. So be sure to be here and check that out. Super excited to talk to CJ on the 1st and have y'all get a chance to ask him questions about changing careers. Kind of mid stride. He's been a liberal arts teacher and he's moving into a data career. So super exciting. He's super excited about moving into data and has a lot of great insights, especially coming from liberal arts background. So, all that to say, you can start your data career wherever you're at. If you have a position now, this is one of the things that I've talked about early on. But if you're in a job now and it's not a data career and it's not a data position, but you have or can get access to some data, then learning how to take that data and provide some insights that maybe otherwise you don't have available to you, even if you're just using Excel. Power BI is a free download, and you could create a local Power BI report. But and learning how to manipulate and clean and get data in a format that you can provide some insights is a big deal. It shows your initiative in your current job. It provides you something that you could, a real world example that you could put onto a resume or potentially show in a portfolio, and potentially even move up in your current role, in your current org that you work in, your current business that you work in. So, yeah, be sure that you're looking at those opportunities. If you're struggling on finding a specific position in data now, if you're in any position, even if you're in sales, if you're in customer service, if you're in retail, there's so many opportunities out there where either you could take something and make it more efficient and build your portfolio and your skills that way, or take something, build a report, and show some insights, and it build your experience in your portfolio that way. Those things, you know, we talked about soft skills, and that initiative, that drive, that desire to learn and teach yourself goes a long way when you're in an interview and when you're in front of a hiring manager. Awesome. Again, really, I've really enjoyed the conversations tonight. If anybody has any other questions, be sure to pop them in the chat. Um, we talk about kind of all things data engineering on on these chats. We've gone into a lot of things. And again, over my 25 years, I have been a director of data and analytics. I've been an individual contributor. Early in my career, I actually started in customer service, and use that example that I mentioned. I'm a driver and trying to get a job of a Microsoft Data Engineering Associate. Nice. How can I sell myself? Gene, that is an awesome question. So trying to get a job, you already have. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment that you have your, I'm assuming it's the the DP 203, that the data engineering. Is it the Azure Data Engineering Associate or just the Microsoft Data Engineering Associate? But if it's the Azure one, that'll go a long way. Yeah, awesome. That in and of itself should go a long way in getting getting your foot in the door. So yeah, that DP 203 cert is great. It's go out, search for data, you search for Azure data engineer and stuff will come up. Even if it's a senior position, honestly, apply for it. Don't If you match 40-50% of what's on a job rec, don't be afraid to apply for it and let them know that, hey, you're trying to get into things. Uh, there are definitely jobs out there for people that have taken the effort to get that cert. That cert, I think, will go a long way. Should go a long way in securing a position and finding something. At least getting you a face to face with a hiring manager, and getting your foot in the door. Again, maybe you might not get a data engineering position if you don't have any other experience other than that cert. Had it for 3 years now and you haven't been able to find something. I'm so sorry, man. That is that should not be. If you so you say you're a driver, like are you like a semi drive? Are you driving like cross country? Or is it maybe I misunderstood what your current position is? Um, but and that I wonder if that's part of what people see. um Delivery driver. um so do you have some stuff maybe do you have a Git repository? If you have a Git repository, I would start going out and um putting stuff in it so that you can show that and kind of show, even a lot of times on job recs here lately, I've noticed that there's a place. Good. That's perfect. Um, I've noticed that there are places now for you to put your Git repository link, and so that potential employers could look at that. Oh, you want to share that in the chat, and I'm happy to share that. That's awesome. If you have a portfolio website, I'm happy to maybe spotlight that for you, maybe get you more visibility. I'm happy to get you out, get your portfolio out there if you think that would help. Um, and feel free to shoot me an email. It's chris.gambill@gambilldataengineering.com. You could find it on the YouTube page. And if you want to reach out to me that way. But I'm gonna look. I'll look real quickly on LinkedIn. Let's take a look and see what's out there. because you should be able to. Are you in the U.S. or are you in where are you at? Sorry if I'm being too personal. East Coast. Okay, I'm in East Tennessee, so I'm East Coast as well. So let's see. So much is Azure Data Engineer. Um, Here's one, IntelliBus. So, since you have that cert, I would specifically target Azure Data Engineer. Um, Make sure that have I know part of that cert is understanding, setting up the resources and getting in there and creating some pipelines and data flows. Um, Do you outside of that cert? I assume that on your portfolio website, you also have experience create, some at least project based experience creating pipelines and stuff in Synapse or ADF. Um, just looking, and maybe do you have some Python experience as well? Some at least some practice, some foundational knowledge. Cool, perfect. Uh, it, here's what I think, honestly. I think that people see delivery driver on your resume if that's something you're putting on your resume, and that perfect some Python. Um, I I suspect that that's part of it. I suspect that they see that and they're shying away from you. Uh, If you can, trying to think of a place that you can go that maybe doesn't cost money, but um, or that's inexpensive. Ian, shoot me an email. Let me see if I could get some resources up for you. But if you could change your resume instead of a shoot me your resume too. If you could change your resume a little bit instead of being like job based, right? In, and it be like project based, and you could list out some projects and some things that you've done, then I think that would make a difference. Depending on what your resume looks like now. So anytime that you can show uh, the things that you've done, um, then that'll help. In addition, um, the other pieces, I see several Azure Data Engineer positions out here. There's not a ton. Most of what comes up on my feed are senior positions and leads. I'm trying to get into stuff that's a little bit earlier stage. Um, Here's a cool one. The other encouragement that I would tell you is find a recruiter. Um, People shy away from recruiters, but honestly, my experience is if you could find a local recruiter that you could have a face to face with and talk to them about what your actual background is, they'll for free, for no cost to you, help you with your resume. A lot of times they'll be an advocate for you because they're making money once you get a position, and then all those, all that's out of not out of pocket to you as far as cost wise goes. um but recruiters, especially early in my career, were a big help, and developing those relationships now with recruiters will help you later on too as you move up, because they'll reach back out to you and say, hey, I've got this other position, I know you've been in it for a few years, this is a more senior level position, and they'll, a lot of times they'll keep you in mind as your career progresses as well, especially if you can find a recruiter that's maybe been with the same company for a few years and they're going to stick with it. um but yeah, if you're interested in it, Shoot me your resume, shoot me your portfolio. I'm happy to take a look at it, and maybe we can uh, get you some traction. And maybe I could send you some of these that I'm seeing on LinkedIn too, because there's some definitely at least a handful of early stage data engineer positions. And I would say, if again, not, I know data engineer is probably your passion, but especially since you went after that cert, and I'll say that Azure is awesome. I love Azure, but or Azure, but don't don't feel like don't pigeonhole yourself, and be sure that maybe you apply for some analyst positions as well. Uh-oh, let me see. Let's open the Discord here. I have something. Update. No, I don't want to update. Go away. Let's see. Invite people. No. Copy. Try this one. Or it's coming through now. Try that link. See if that works for you. Um, maybe something got messed up. For those of you that are on, I just popped the Discord link in the chat. So if you're interested in joining the Discord link, try that for me. I've got VJ here that's having some issues with it, but hopefully we could get it working here. Awesome. Well, again, thank you all for jumping on tonight. I really do enjoy having these conversations. Um, and if you do have any other questions or ideas, or any stories that you'd like to share about your own personal experiences, put them in the chat. If anybody that's on, maybe has some experience in the profession and would like to maybe come on with me on a Friday night, let me know. I'm happy to we could have a live conversation in front of everybody too. So if that's something that you're interested in, I'm happy to facilitate that as well. VJ, if you're still on, let me know if you got that going. Oh, I think this is you. Yay, you made it. Awesome. Very cool. Glad you're able to get in. Uh, yeah, again, Gene, if you're still on and have any other questions, let me know. Again, feel free to shoot me an email. VJ, uh, you know, let me know if you've got any questions that you'd like me to cover tonight. And for any of the rest of you that are still on, let me know in the chat what you want to talk about tonight. I'm happy to have those conversations. Uh, really enjoyed getting to talk to Mike and Gene uh, and everybody tonight. Thank you all for jumping on. You really, these Friday night calls, calls, live streams are. Uh, I really enjoy doing them and getting to interact with you. So I'd love to interact with anybody that again, if getting on here with me is something that you're interested in, shoot me an email, shoot me a message on Discord, join the Discord, and shoot me a message there saying, let me know that you'd love to get on. Building a project, say solving a SQ problem on live, but they're also umpteen resources. Yeah, I mean, we could definitely definitely can do that. Uh, there are umpteen million resources, but if there is a specific scenario that you want to cover, absolutely. If you let me know in advance, before Friday night, so that just so I can make sure that I have access to any resources, and I'm able to spin up any resources that we may need. But if you have a specific scenario you'd like for me to cover, um, yeah, yeah, happy to do that. That's a great idea. How can I plan and do an enterprise project to display? Um, so that's a great question. There's so many data sources out there that you could practice with, but specifically if you want to be in a corporation, um, like AT&T, like Microsoft, like uh, Google, um, any mid to large corporation, you're going to be dealing with APIs a lot, honestly, um, and other databases, right? ERP databases are often Oracle based, so figuring that out, you're not often just going to be ingesting CSV files, right? Which is so much of what you get from various data sets. So APIs are a great resource. A lot of places, like I just finished up a Zoom project, right? And so you can go out and um, before I say this, I'm gonna double check, but I think you could go out and at least get a trial membership to Zoom, um, a trial license for Zoom, and practice with their sandbox, and being able to pull APIs and move that into a SQL server, um, or a like a you know, Gene, for you. I mean, you could you may be past the point where you could do your Azure 90-day $200 or $300 credit. If you are, I would imagine you probably use that up doing preparing for your cert, but you could always you'd always trick it and get a different email address, uh, and do it that way, um, and spin up a Synapse instance or spin up a ADF resource, um, and practice that way. But the nice thing about ADF and Synapse is it handles APIs so incredibly well, and so I do that. Identify what corporation maybe that you want to work for and figure out what tools that they use, and then go out and see if that resource has an API that has a sandbox that you could get maybe a trial license for, and go out and start pulling that data and seeing what it looks like and seeing what that process would be like. um, if you're talking about building like a data warehouse from scratch, then I would, I've got, for small businesses, for SMBs, right, for small and medium sized businesses, the three biggies are HubSpot, QuickBooks, and Square, right? And all three of those, you could go out and get access to their sandboxes and learn how to use their APIs and pull data from their APIs, either from a Synapse, an ADF, or a Python, directly using like the request library in Python, um, and start practicing pulling all that data in. Um, you could even feed data back into those that you'd set things up and have like, I want to say that QuickBooks, it's like a 90-day trial period, but you could feed data into and create kind of data sets, um, of customers, of sale, invoices and things like that, so that you could learn how to pull it back out and learn how to format it and create a data warehouse of all those different resources, and then start building some reports on the back end. So you kind of follow that through all the way from identifying those sources, creating the pipelines, doing the ETL process, ELT process, um, moving that data from the API maybe into an ADLS, and then into a table, into a database, into an a SQL database, Azure SQL database, um, and then aggregating some of that data so that you could put it into even like a Power BI report, um, and having that practice to be able to show that, hey, I logically created dimensions, created facts, and so that you could show that you have that conceptual knowledge of how to create models, um, will being able to show that experience will go a long way. But those are the big three. And I'll say that HubSpot is not just a SMB tool. It, at AT&T, we for um, the AT&T had acquired Alien Vault, and now Alien Vault is uh, is now Level Blue, a company called Level Blue for a cybersecurity company, and they used HubSpot, right, for customer stuff, for marketing stuff. And so HubSpot is not just a small business, small medium sized business application. It is, larger businesses use that too. So having experience being able to work with that HubSpot data is a good exercise to go through. Um, hey, good morning, Kumar. Hope you're doing well in India. That's awesome. Welcome. If you have any questions, pop them in. Happy to talk through stuff. Um, and Gene, I'll also say, don't maybe, since you are a delivery driver now, working with some small businesses and seeing if they're willing to let you get in there and maybe do some consulting, some entry level consulting on getting them started on their own data journeys, and that way you could build some real world experience and real world portfolio examples, and even then they could give you recommendations as well when you're applying for jobs. So don't neglect the fact that you've built this skill set that has some practical use. Small businesses don't have a lot of money, don't necessarily have a lot of resources that they could spend, and sometimes they're happy for the help. So maybe if you could get connected with a small business, then that might help build that portfolio. Um, awesome questions. I've really enjoyed the conversation tonight, guys. Thank you all for jumping on. And again, anybody that has any questions, pop them in the chat. Super excited about the diversity of the community that we're building. Gene, super excited that somebody else is on the East Coast aside from me. Awesome. So yeah, great conversations tonight, guys. Thanks. Hopefully you're getting something out of it as well. Um, and yeah, for anybody that hasn't yet, be sure to join that Discord community, trying to build that community over there as well, where we can, you know, share potential job opportunities, continue to learn and grow, continue to, help each other to uh, move forward in our careers. Oh, hey, very cool. I was always afraid that doing this late at night that I wouldn't get a whole lot of East Coast people, that I get like a lot of West Coast people and a lot of overseas people, because it's either early in the morning or earlier in the day for them. Uh, so yeah. Yeah, Azure skills transfer to AWS and GCP. Go out and practice. Kumar, I'm going to get to that second. Yeah. So, sorry. One topic at a time. Azure skills transfer to AWS and GCP. It depends on which skills, right? So, like for Azure, like you understand if you have your, as somebody that has their cert for that Azure data engineer, you understand how to set up a key vault. It would be similar for you to set up a secret manager in AWS. You understand how to set up and spin up a resource for ADF, it would be very similar for you to spin up that resource, that AWS Glue resource in AWS. Um, it, so there are definitely some transferable skills between the two, and with GCP, the process for spinning things up in GCP are a little bit different, more different than they are between Azure and AWS, in my opinion. Might have as much to do with the fact that I've worked more in AWS than I have in GCP, and in Azure than I have in GCP. Um, but the Google Cloud stuff, the big data, um, and um, and the resources in Google Cloud are are comparable as well. But AWS has ADLS, right? The Azure Data Lake Storage, and then did I say AWS? Azure has the Azure Data Lake Storage, and then AWS has the S3 containers. Very comparable, right? Um, they're different. They're distinctly different, but setting up the resources, the basic concepts of what a data lake storage is, are pretty comparable. So yeah, I would say particularly from Azure to AWS, it's pretty comparable. Um, I like AWS more. I know I'm more familiar with Azure, uh, and I like Synapse and Fabric and ADF better than I like AWS Glue, but I like the elastic resources that are in Azure and being able to spin up a Fargate or an EC2 instance, which is a Linux-based, virtual box basically. Um, and then it, I like Python, so I really enjoy, for example, building a Python script, putting it into a Docker container, and then using the Elastic services in AWS uh, to perform my ETL. So that's one of my favorite patterns that I use. But um, I'll say from from an API standpoint, I really enjoy using Azure because it does such a fantastic job flattening the API data, the JSON data that comes through, and being able to communicate with other APIs. So, but yes, to answer your question, it does. The skills, is particularly from Azure to AWS, are pretty transferable. Kumar, I've been working on a non-IT job at MNC for the past 3 years, primarily handling repetitive tasks in Excel, feeling exhausted with the routine and want to start learning new skills. So I've decided to begin with SQL. SQL is super important. Can't express how much how important SQL is to any data profession, data engineer, data analyst, even the data scientists. Are using SQL in some fashion, some method. So teaching yourself SQL is huge if you want to move into a data profession, um, and you could do that in Excel, right? You could use Power Query and practice in Excel. Um, yeah, thank you, Gene, for reiterating. Yeah, it it cannot tell you. And I'll say that SQL's been around for 50 years. I've been doing this job for 25 years. When we got the ANSI stuff, when ANSI became and came in and started standardizing some of the SQL, that made things so much easier. But teaching yourself SQL and learning how to use it, even if you know, go out and download, you know, a Postgres, get a Postgres database that's locally on your computer, get a SQL Server Express that's locally on your computer so that you could practice. Um, there's plenty of those free resources that you could get and download and practice. But SQL, that's awesome. Kumar, you're going in the right direction. Uh, Teaching yourself SQL and starting to learn those skills. Once you get SQL under your belt, and Gene, maybe you can help me reiterate this too as well. But SQL, pick a cloud platform, whether it is AWS, GCP, or Azure, and get familiar with it. There is Yeah, October project can help. There you go. Look at that. Thank you, Gene. Um, but go out and practice. There's a bunch of, there's so many online resources. It you know the W3 schools website, um, while basic and has been around for a small eternity, um, is a great resource as well. Don't neglect that W3 schools is, stuff as well. Check that out. There's some um, there's some places where you could put in your code and execute it, and it'll give you a response. So don't neglect that. Um, there's plenty of resources out there that that you could use. SQL's a great start. Python continues to be important. Pick a cloud platform. If you've been, in the workforce for a while, and you've probably developed some soft skills where you can, communicate well, where you can, maybe you have some examples of leadership skills you've demonstrated. But if you've done some repetitive tasks in Excel, I would start with trying to figure out how to automate those repetitive tasks that you're doing in Excel in your current role. Um, Even if they're independently on your own, maybe sneak some stuff off and can, you know, figure out how to automate some of that stuff. Uh, Maybe you could bring it back to your job and be like, "Hey, I figured out if how to write a script that will go through and do all this stuff for me." Even if it only helps you in your current job, so that you have some other time to focus on other things, then that's a big deal. But that's a practical uh, example of something that you could take to a potential future employer and potentially use as a portfolio instance where you took some data or uh, some current process and made it more efficient. And if you do that, and for all of you that are out there, as you're doing things, if you're doing stuff for in your current role, um, any specific numbers where you could say, I cut down the time that it takes to do this process by 30 minutes a day, or by 10%, or by 30%, or I improved sales by X%. Um, Anytime that you could use those specific numbers in your resume, in your examples that you give during your interviews, that's a big deal. Big deal. Um, but yeah, no, Kumar, that's awesome. I'm super excited for you. SQL is SQL's a good gateway drug to programming. So it'll get you into a spot where once you learn SQL, then you could learn uh, move into Python, and it makes Python that much easier to learn. Um, yes, yeah. Uh, and if if the Microsoft stack is what you're looking at, and I would say this to Gene as well, don't neglect learning SSIS. Um, so the the older version of ADF, right? Definitely different than ADF, but the ETL tool that we used before ADF for the Microsoft stack. Don't neglect learning SSIS, because there's still so many companies that have SSIS packages that are running on prem, that part of your job may at some point be migrating those packages um, into ADF or Synapse or Fabric. Um, that's awesome. Yeah, Gene, if you could pop that link down in there, I'd love to share it in the Discord community as well. That's awesome. Yeah, it that and the that that moving an SSIS package into into an ADF pipeline is a good practical example that you could give during interviews, that you could put on your resume, that I'm sure that you have in your portfolio. But it is there will be whole jobs that is what you will do. Um, don't be, something I didn't mention earlier and didn't think of earlier, but don't neglect and don't be afraid to apply for contract positions. So much is contract to hire or even just short-term contracts to help you start getting some experience under your belt that you put on a resume. Let me see if I can find it. Pop band came up. It came up as a pop band, so I'll poke around and see if I can find a link. And VJ, if I find a link, then I'll be sure to share it out with the Discord community. I'll poke around and see if I can find it. Cover project. Mm. Yeah, again, great conversation tonight, Kumar. Um, yeah, it SQL is a great path to choose. Pick a cloud platform, automate those automate those repetitive tasks in Excel. There's got to be a way that you can use Power Query, or even if you're writing some VBA, maybe any type of skill that you could start using to start developing and having a portfolio. Developing those skills, have a portfolio. Yeah, man. Uh, you're welcome. I hope that you enjoyed it and hope that you got something out of it. I definitely enjoy having these conversations. Thank you. Thanks for jumping on. Really, all of you, thank you for jumping on tonight. It's I love having these, getting to interact with everybody. So, for SSIS, I don't have anything. Let me see if there's SSIS is not popular anymore. I think SSIS tutorial. Pluralsight has something. Um, I mean, Microsoft Learn has a lesson. Uh, I'll put this in the chat. That's just a link to Microsoft Learn, and they've got a project that you could do. Even walks it that link will even walk you through how to install the Adventure Works. If I could speak, Adventure Works sample database, which has a bunch of data in it that you could practice with. But then you could also create some SSIS packages there. Let me look and see if there's any good videos from anybody that I know. Mm, here's a beginner one. I don't know. No. Um, Old. I'll say that anything that you're going to find out there is probably going to be at least a few years old, because Azure's been such a predominant uh, driver in the industry. Um, Check those out. That might help. Maybe I can do a video too that might um, get you some more knowledge on it. Maybe we could even do a live on SSIS packages and how to create a SSIS package, and maybe even how to migrate it into ADF if that's something maybe that you all think that you would benefit from. Um, Definitely a common use case out there. Again, great conversation, guys. Thanks. Well, thanks for being patient while I poked around to find something to give you. Hope, hopefully hopefully that'll help. Hmm. Okay, Gene. I'm gonna write that down. Again, really, anything that you think that would help you, and that one is a very um, common thing that you'll do, especially right now, and I foresee that continuing to be a common thing at least for the next few years. Um, Migrating SSIS packages into uh, Azure. I'll say that another one that happens, and I hate that this happens, but migrating from one cloud platform to another, um, especially for large organizations that may be acquiring smaller businesses. Um, a lot of times there will be a mismatch between cloud platforms that the two businesses are using. And specifically, that happened to me when Alien Vault was acquired by AT&T. Um, and I had to migrate from AWS, all our stuff from AWS into Azure. And so it's a big underhaul when you're moving from one cloud platform to another. But yeah, yeah, it's a pain. Um, because even the use cases between the two were significantly different. And I'll say that like AWS has Azure functions and um, not AWS. I'm sorry, Azure has Azure functions and AWS has um, lambdas, and so they don't exactly migrate, but an Azure function is the closest thing to a lambda that you can migrate to without too much work. But that happens. Anyways, horror stories. If y'all want to ever hear horror stories, I can old horror stories. I'm happy to share those. Not great. SSIS to ADF. Um, and when I do that SSIS one, I'll probably use ADF not because for any other reason than cost. ADF is just cheaper than spinning up a Synapse or a Fabric resource. Right? Uh, it would be incredibly nice if they can collaborate to migrate. You know what? I'll say that I use Snowflake to. Snowflake was my data warehouse, and so the great part was that Snowflake did a fantastic job helping to facilitate that migration of the data. Um, I still had to migrate the pipelines um, and all of our ETL processes, but uh, Snowflake handled all of the data migration um, because we had to move um, from obviously an ADF based Snowflake to an Azure based Snowflake. And we could have done a multi tenant Snowflake or a multi cloud Snowflake where it could pull data from either or, but either way, Snowflake was fantastic uh, with facilitating that migration of that data. Because they did it. They migrated the data for us, which was awesome. And then some things changed connection wise. Um, setting up those connection strings, but um, just because the name of the resource changed. not for any other reason, but Snowflake, if you haven't gotten a chance to get into Snowflake and play with Snowflake, Snowflake's really cool. I really enjoy Snowflake, and Snowflake has some SQL functions that you don't get in the other flavors of SQL, um, and the other dialects because it just isn't there. They sometimes some of them are in the other. Haha, yeah, and it's Snowflake's fairly popular. You've got from a big data standpoint, right? From a modern, more modern um, data warehouse standpoint, you have Snowflake and you have um, BigQuery, which is the GCP version, and then you have Delta Lake, right? The Databricks piece. And the big competitors right now are you see this going back and forth a lot: Databricks and Snowflake, and I love Databricks because of the notebook stuff and being able to flip from Scala to Python to SQL to Spark and having that flexibility. And Delta Lake is really cool. Having Delta as your architecture is cool. Having things that sit in S3 buckets or in ADLS and connecting that into your tables in Delta and using that architecture is cool, and it's flexible and it scales well. But I'll say that either in Snowflake or in Databricks, your cost can get out of control very quickly if you have like auto scaling on. You could Google horror stories of auto scaling all over the internet and they'll pop up. um but Snowflake offers a 90-day trial period, so if you want, it's free, free 90-day trial period. If you're interested in getting into Snowflake, that's a great option if you want to get out there and play with it. But um you know, one of my two of my favorite things with Snowflake, and then I'll probably let y'all go here soon. But two of my favorite things with Snowflake are it has, instead of having to have a yeah, I'll bet. Sorry, Gene just said that he did a project with Azure with Databricks and had to deconstruct it as soon as he was finished. Yeah, Databricks can get pricey. Snowflake can get pricey too. If you accidentally leave something on like an extra large uh, size, resource size, instead of scaling it back down to an extra small. But and you definitely have to be careful with that, and you have to be careful with that with any of the cloud stuff. The auto scaling is dangerous. But anyways, Snowflake has a contains. So instead of having to do like and having wildcards, you could use contains and not use wildcards, and it does a fantastic job. So and it's quick and efficient, and it's awesome. The other thing, the other thing that I love about Snowflake is it handles both XML and JSON data incredibly well. Um, yes, you have to use triggers to control cost. Um, but people forget that. People, especially people that maybe haven't gone through the the cert, or they haven't had any practical knowledge and they've just maybe self-taught. They've or business. A lot of businesses, they take on-prem um, data engineers that have only maybe done on-prem and throw them into the cloud world, and they're self-taught and they're trying to use different tools to learn, and they may not know that they could use triggers, and you know set up alerts and do things like scale up for a specific pipeline that's running, and that's immediately scale back down after that's done. um, so important, it's an important piece to know. it can make the difference between, having a $10,000 bill at the end of the month and having a $100,000 bill at the end of the month. I've not personally experienced that, but I saw it happen at AT&T where somebody accidentally left something on extra large on our Snowflake instance, and all of a sudden there was like a $300,000 bill at the end of the month, and it was not pretty. Not pretty. It happens, but it's not pretty. But yeah, Gene's absolutely right here. You have to use triggers and set up stuff in your code uh, so that you're scaling up and scaling down manually, uh, and using those triggers instead of uh, accidentally leaving it scaled up. No, no, nobody got fired. Uh, it was definitely a conversation that had to be had, but no, nobody got fired. Um, in a corporate environment, it's hard to fire somebody. You have to go through lots of steps. If it was a repetitive thing, like we had to coach it, that person had to be coached on making sure that they don't do it again. Um, and I would say that person probably never did it again. But um, yeah, when your VP has a conversation with you, it's probably not something you ever forget uh, in a large corporation like that. Or if a COO has a conversation with you, don't forget it. But yeah, nobody got fired, but it is not a pretty conversation. You, it, I, um, a first offense uh, is a coaching. A second offense would have been like a PIP, would have been like a performance improvement plan. Uh, and then if something happened during that improvement plan uh, for that rep, then for that data engineer, then it would have turned into a uh, conversation about employment. But that's a general progression of how things work in a corporate world. But yeah, nobody wants to see a 300,000 bill pop up for a month for your Snowflake instance, unless some businesses that probably is normal. Um, that's a good question. Um, if if you get a PIP, it might be good to start looking. Yeah. I mean, I'll be real honest. If you get to the point where you're on a PIP, it wouldn't be a bad idea to start looking, because generally, um, for those of you that don't know, a PIP is a performance improvement plan. Um, and so if you get to the point where you're on a PIP for something, hopefully you have a good leader and you have a good relationship with that leader, and you could have an upfront and honest conversation with them of, am I being moved out of the business? Um, but if you don't, then 100% I would start looking. If I'd so I had one person that I put on a PIP, not ever, but this one instance where I put somebody on a PIP, and she did a fantastic job. She turned it around. We had some, honest, you know, straightforward conversations, and she did a amazing job of, making changes. I honestly think that prior to me moving into this particular position, that she didn't feel like she was heard, didn't feel like just didn't feel heard, didn't feel appreciated, and she was able to turn it around, and she successfully completed her PIP, and and did a great job. Other people, they get put on a part of it is going to be your perception, your outlook towards completing that PIP. If you walk into that PIP, that performance improvement plan, and you blow it away and you do an awesome job, then awesome. You'll move forward, probably will not have any other issues. But generally, a PIP is there to move you out of the business. I mean, it's just is. It's yeah. You learn that the hard way. That's a that sucks, man. That's a horrible way to have to learn that. But yeah, it happens. It happens. Especially if you don't. Yeah, especially if you don't have a great leader, right? If you don't have a great mentor, great leader, a great boss, then where you can where they're genuinely trying to help you to stay, genuinely trying to you know help you gain the skills and the knowledge and the ability to be successful. um yeah, if you don't, and you get to the point where on a PIP, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be hard. That's a great question, great conversation, I think, to have. It's because it's important. It's important to know, um, and it sucks. I'll say that, um, even from it's a very dad thing to say, but like it hurt. It sucks for the leader as well to. Um, I mean, hopefully, it sucks for the leader because they care. Um, I did, but it sucks no matter what. It sucks for, even if they don't care, it sucks for the leader because they're having to put that, extra time into, having those weekly meetings probably. If you get to the point where you're putting somebody on PIP, you're having weekly meetings, you're having to do all this extra documentation. It's super time consuming for the leader as well. Hopefully, it also sucks because the leader cares. Um, it, Hopefully, you have a leader that cares when you're in that. No matter what. Hopefully, you have a leader that cares no matter what. Um, and hopefully, if you ever get into that position, you have a leader that cares, that will genuinely help you um, out of that situation, one way or the other. It's rough. It's rough. Awesome. That thank you, Gene, for asking that question. That is it's a rough one. That's a rough situation to be in. Awesome. Well, and I see we've actually picked up some other people. If you have any questions, any stories, any help that you want to share with the community, pop it down in the chat. We could talk about it. Uh, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes these calls, I keep on calling a call, but sometimes these live streams do end up lasting about 2 hours. So, especially when we've had some great conversations like we've had tonight, I've really, uh, Gene, Kumar, Vijay, I've really uh, enjoyed our conversation tonight. Thanks guys for interacting, and I hope you got something out of it too. Uh, you've definitely helped each other. I'm dead set on finding the this October project link to be able to share with the community. Um, I have to dig in a little bit, but it is because the first page of stuff is is a pop band, but but I'd love to learn more about this October project and see what it's all about. Um, Cool. Again, great conversation. Um, yeah, getting to, and Gene, having a project where you got a chance to use Databricks, that's a big one too. You know, if you have that um, that experience, go out and search for stuff where Databricks. It doesn't matter if it's connected to Azure or if it's connected to AWS. It's Databricks is Databricks. So same thing with Snowflake. If anybody has experience with Snowflake, whether you're connecting to an S3 bucket in AWS or you're connecting to an ADLS container in Azure, um, it's the same either way. So it those skills are transferable um, between those. And generally, anymore, you could even do a lot of the stuff that you do in Databricks in Synapse because you could create notebooks in Synapse um, and do a lot of stuff there too. So it definitely transferable skills regardless of which of those tools that you're using. Don't don't neglect that. Awesome. Very cool. So yeah, does anybody have any other questions tonight? I'm happy to answer them or suggestions on things um, that you'd like to see covered by our channel. Uh, any ideas? Power apps. Um, I have a little tiny experience with creating power apps, um, and that is only because uh, I had created a pipeline that fed into a Power BI report that I had to create for our manufacturing floor for this company that I worked with. Um, and so I created this Power App that triggered the pipeline to run and then would keep on refreshing until that pipeline, until it got the notification back from the pipeline. It would go out and check every couple seconds. Has the pipeline finished? Has the pipeline finished? And then it would come back once it returned that the pipeline finished. Then it would refresh the Power BI report that was inside of the Power App, and then would you know would populate the data once the Power BI report refreshed. So that's the little Power App that I had created uh, about a year or so ago. So yeah, uh, not the normal use case, I don't think, for Power Apps. Generally, it's I mean, I have seen Power Apps a lot used to embed Power BI reports, but generally, I think that they're used to you know create forms and create visualizations that accept user input and then feed that data back into a database table um, in a OLTP database, right, in the transactional database, and and then be able to retrieve that data for some type of reporting as well. But yeah, that my Power App was triggered my pipeline run and then refreshed a Power BI report. Well, the user had to put in the like a part number, and then that part number would be fed into the pipeline. The pipeline would run and pull all the rest of the tree of different parts that were needed that were kind of below that um, that part that were needed to build this plane piece, and then it would again, like I said, populate and refresh that Power BI report. But it had to be the reason why the pipeline had to be run like that is because they needed the live data from their ERP system, like at the moment. So the pipeline had to be run at the time that they that they requested it. They couldn't just be some type of uh, report that was looked at from a batch, some type of batch run, because very reasonably they may have had their ERP system sitting here and made a change there, and then hit the Power App to refresh the report. So and we didn't have streaming between the two because it was an on-prem Oracle-based ERP system, and that data was huge, and it was constantly used, and there was a lot of interactions. So we were only hitting it overnight so that we didn't impact the floor. And you run into that use case a lot, so that you don't impact the business front end systems. That's a great question. I like that one. Power Apps are a cool resource, are a cool tool. I don't think that data engineers get to play with it enough. Where I'm at now, we have a whole team, like we have a whole Power Apps team that's all they do. There's only 3 of them, but still, we have a Power Apps team that's all they do is create Power Apps. We did have some IoT devices. Generally, they were monitoring like the heat in certain areas of the manufacturing floor, and so those IoT devices streamed that data back into ADLS container. Right, we had Azure functions and IoT functions in Azure that fed that data back into a ADLS container, and then that was our bronze layer, right? And and we had that data that was sitting there constantly available and constantly being monitored, but not for the plain pieces. We had scanner, they would scan out the parts and they would use the part, but then they'd have to do these inspections and audits and see, okay, what changes were made between the way the plane was actually built and the original kind of specs, and see what change, because changes have to be made sometimes. Sometimes a hose may need to be half an inch shorter somewhere, or something, right? That made a difference, and then they had to make sure that they documented it and documented why that change occurred. When you're building planes, there's a lot of FAA requirements that have to be followed, especially when it comes to the heat piece that I was talking about. Worked in a lot of different industries. Manufacturing, telecommunications, cybersecurity, sales. I mean, as a data engineer, but it's fun learning new businesses. I would encourage anybody that's just getting into it to it's good to develop domain knowledge, and good to have that background and to be in depth in a certain domain, whether that be healthcare or manufacturing or telecommunications or whatever the case may be. But don't try not to get too stuck in one place, that you don't get a chance to experience other industries, because you never know what is going to spark some excitement for you, and you might find a passion in data from a different industry. I really do love these conversations. Gene, man, I'm glad that you joined tonight. I'm glad you all joined tonight. Don't mistake me, but Gene, you've asked some great questions, and Kumar, you have too. Again, thanks guys for jumping on. Have really enjoyed our conversation tonight. We are nearing 2 hours, and I continue to see people jump on. So again, for those of you that are just now jumping on, pop your questions in the chat. Happy to answer, have those conversations. Um, I'll take any industry. Yeah, I get it. So, do you mind if I ask? You did mention that you're currently a delivery driver. Do you mind if I ask? Uh, is it like a UPS, FedEx, or is it like a Uber Eats or Instacart? Not that it matters. I'm just trying to think of ways that maybe you could take data from maybe some of what you're doing now and create a project. One of the big thing. Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, I didn't want you to have to get too specific, but I'm trying to think of maybe I wonder if there's like data that even if you document different pieces of your route or something that and how long it takes on different days to get from point A to point B. I mean, I'm sure that they have that data somewhere, right? And they're making you make all right turns or whatever, but and have things specifically mapped out, but might be an interesting use case that you can play with. But I don't know. Trying to think of what you could do currently. Probably that's probably one that's hard to find something where you're at now that you could use, because I'm sure that it's not like you have a computer in the truck with you. That's a hard one. Maybe though you go out to I bet that you could do web scraping of whichever of the big three that you work for, or maybe all three, um, and do web scraping and pull different stats from the different pages about uh, delivery schedules or something, your package deliveries or something, and compare the three and create some statistics. Might be an interesting project. Definitely wouldn't be something you could do like at work, but might be. I mean, if you're interested in that. Obviously, there's a ton of other stuff out there, but that you don't have to use that, but might be neat. If you're a nerdy person, then there's always like the Marvel Universe API or like the Rick and Morty API that you could go out and hit and play with that data. Awesome. It again, guys. I continue to see people jump on. Uh, if you have any specific questions or general questions that you'd like to ask me, pop them in the chat. Again, I've been doing this for 25 years. Um, been in lots of different positions and industries over the years. Only a handful of companies, but at AT&T, I was in mobility and was in cybersecurity and uh, had my own consulting business years ago for a few years, working with some small businesses here in East Tennessee, um, helping them to begin their data journey, and also doing some website design. So did some website and database design years and years ago, 2008, 2011 ish. 2008 was not a smart time to try to start your own business, uh, but I did it like months before the stock market went. So just bad timing. But for those of you thinking about insurance, I mean, about consulting, it's a great opportunity for somebody that's just starting. If you're willing to maybe look on Upwork and start doing stuff uh, for a low price. There's a lot of competition, but if you could get a few under your belt, it's a great portfolio builder. HTML3 old. If you want to do some, Jane, if you want to do some web scraping, be sure you look at, you know, go out, grab Python, get, beautiful soup or Selenium, and start looking at those and seeing what you could get. If it's not too much of a JavaScript based page, you probably get a ton of data, even if it is anymore. You'd use those, get a bunch of data. Awesome. Well, we are just over 2 hours. It is just past midnight. I think I'm going to jump off here, get some rest tonight, and get back at some things in the morning. But thank you all very much for jumping on tonight. Have really honestly enjoyed this conversation. Um, you know, Gene, if you want me to take it again, offers out there. If you want me to take a look at your resume, take a look at your portfolio, and provide any feedback, I'm happy to do that. Definitely have been a director over the years, part of my career, and been in the position where I was hiring people, so I can do my best to give you some good feedback that you could use and take that and hopefully find a position, find a work home there. And that that offer's open to anybody. You can go out and shoot me an email. I'm happy to take a look and help you the best I can. But I'll let y'all get back to it. And thank you all again for jumping on. Have really enjoyed our conversations this evening. And I will talk to you all again next Friday. Thanks, guys.